Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the live on picking up heavy things. I'm going to hang out here for a few minutes. We started a little late. We could not do this on our phones, so I'm doing this on my computer due to some Wi-Fi issues. There are basically 4 common faults that I want to talk about when it comes to lifting up things off the ground, whether it's your kid, a bar, could be something small, it could be something big. And then I have basically six things to think about as you progress back to deadlifting. I know Coach Anders wanted to be on this. One of the common things that he sees as a fault is basically the starting position for people. When they're at the bottom of their deadlift, I'll give myself some space. When they're at the bottom, that's where people often make the most problems because they just don't know how to set up. They lift too much with their low back. They might be an immature mover, etc. So I have found in my clinical practice, as well as being a coach, that the bottom position is definitely a problem, but also there's things in between that happen that people lose motor control. They don't have the motor control. They don't really know what their body is, how to stabilize their spine. And especially when you're lifting something in front of you, like a child, a moving child, or a big heavy barbell, or flipping a tire, like you're gonna wanna make sure that spine is in a good position and neutral. That typically is the best position. So I got some questions from some of you. So we have Duncan Wallace. He wants to know if the sumo deadlift is more stable than the regular deadlift. And what I would say to that is the sumo deadlift is definitely, so you're going to be lower to the ground. You're picking up a bar that's a little bit, so you're not having to go as far with the bar. And it definitely can be more stable for the hips. For some people, for immature movers, that's a position, it's a little bit more of a complex position for people to get into. However, yes, because the bar, you don't have to lift the bar as far, it tends to be easier to lift something heavy and feel more stable in the position. But with that being said, if your hip structure doesn't allow your legs to go out that far, and if you have to always turn your toes out more than 15 to 20 degrees, that can be a problem. So you kind of have to understand your anatomy and what feels good. But if you're in a sumo position, so sumo position is a wider stance position. So if I'm like so this is more of a sumo position, going hips back, lifting up something heavy. You can go even wider than this, especially if you're competing. A regular deadlift usually is shoulder width apart, roughly more functional kind of deadlift that people work on the most. But sometimes people's hip structures, I think like 10% of the population has this anteverted hip. So if you do have that, it's going to be very hard to go really wide with your hips. So if you feel like, oh my gosh, it's just not going to happen, it's okay. You're not normal, maybe just a little bit. Okay, so Warren, you asked about hip extension at the top. So when you go to standing position, hip extension at the top can be tough, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, so stay tuned. Ethan, just being able to hold the barbell, that's tough for you. That's a grip strength thing, and there are things that you can do. If you go on movementrx.com, you can look up, there's some videos on how to help your grip strength, like holding on to plates, hanging from the bar, spending time doing those things will really help. Not just straight up deadlifting, but like hanging from a pull-up bar for a period of time. Like one of the rules Carl Paoli has is 3 minutes a day hanging from a pull-up bar. That'll really help your grip strength. Try to do it on one arm. Hold the plate with this kind of grasp. Lisa, you said putting the bar back down, so that initiation of going back down and bringing the weight down that is also a problem. I'm going to address that here in a second. Joe, just bending forward, you talked about how progressions and doing single leg RDLs are key to helping you stay healthy, and that's awesome. Doing single leg RDLs are like a great way just to perform maintenance. So I literally I had a guy in my clinic yesterday who trains CrossFit. He's actually training for a bodybuilding competition now too, and doing RDLs and single leg RDLs were bothering him. So I just looked at how he was doing it. Like, I could have done all of this corrective exercise and give him all these mobility drills, but really all I had to do was look at how he was doing the position, and it was the initiation of the movement that was the problem, and causing him stress. So he would have the effects of doing the RDLs and the single leg deadlifts and any other kind of deadlift movement like a couple hours after, that went into the day after. And so just by him improving a couple things on his initiation made all the difference of the world on his back. So I'm going to go into some of those specifics today too. Okay, I cannot see if there's any questions below. So if I don't, at the end, I'm going to hang out, talk about our program a little bit. But if I miss some of your questions, I'll get to them. And if you haven't asked any yet on this platform, please do, and I'll make sure to get to them by the end of the day. I've found, you guys, though, seriously, like, I taught at a yoga retreat in Costa Rica probably 4 years ago. I teach with a mobility wad. The deadlift position, teaching anyone, whether you're a yogi, a parent, a CrossFitter, the hinge position is the one that's the most challenging, and the one that people like aren't the most mature in, I should say. So we all have different movement maturity, so please understand that. Your movement maturity is based on your background in athletics, your background in movement, your ability to learn movement well and learn easily. I also call it your movement intelligence, right? There's this whole thing out about emotional intelligence. Well, there's a movement intelligence there too. Like, how are you connected with your brain and body? The physical and the non-physical. All of those things matter. And I'm telling you, teaching a bunch of freaking yogis how to do a deadlift was so hard. Teaching CrossFitters, it can be hard. It's just a challenging movement that takes time. And so I have to say, like, one of the big reasons why we chose to develop this low back program, this low back fix program, is because a lot of people are struggling with this movement. And it's a progression back to this movement. Like, the shoulder program is a progression back to be able to go overhead. People struggle with that. They get impingement. They have missing overhead position, but they don't know it. They don't know how locked up their neck or thoracic spine are. Things like that. So I'm excited to dive into this and review the common faults. And what I'm going to do is I have a whiteboard right in front of me. I want to talk directly to you versus the whiteboard because you're going to get this glowing light on it. And I'm going to take a picture of it and post it after so you all can take notes on it and keep it. But the first common fault that I see as a strength coach and as a DPT is just we're all weak at end ranges. So the end range of a deadlift, okay, we've got position A, which is at the top, okay, whether you're a sumo, deadlifter, or you're regular, right, the position at the top is where people often are not very strong in that extended position. So when they extend, they actually get a lot of extension via their low back versus via their pelvis. If that makes sense. So a lot of times when people come to the top of their movement, they're doing this arching of their low back, kind of this, I guess it's sexy, right? But not so sexy when you got a crap ton of weight you're holding in front of you, versus, this versus this is what you want to be doing. So we want to extend via the hips versus just the low back. This is where people are kind of unaware of this. So this end range position, when you pick the weight up, okay, position, basically it's the second position of a deadlift. And usually where I like to start beginner deadlifters is you get extension here versus the pelvis. So you don't want this, you want this. So just practicing extending And excursioning, that's even a word, your hips forward, is something to practice. So in the clinic, I test people. How are you extending? Oftentimes you see people do basically a back bend. If I don't see any hip excursion, I know that any kind of extension position is going to be a problem. The bottom position is also a problem. So remember guys, so position, the second position of a deadlift after you pick the weight up, or the starting position of an RDL, you're going to want to extend via your pelvis, not your low back. So not a sexy back, we want sexy pelvis. Okay, so at the bottom position of a deadlift, you want to remember your feet. So your feet shouldn't be turning out like a duck. We're not duck, we're humans. Toes are forward. Okay? And as you go down, so as you approach the bar, right, you want to maintain a flat back. So oftentimes though, this end range position, like the end range of the squat, is our weakest position. So we're literally trying to pick up a heavy load, whether it's a kid or a bar. The lever is long, and we have to pick that weight up to this position. But oftentimes what we see, because people are weak here at this end range position, and they don't know if their back is straight or not, you see this. So kind of this rounding position of the back that goes on. So I'll show you a little more detail. So down here, what happens is people don't know if they're neutral. They're either really extended, or when they initiate, they immediately flex and come up. So they're lifting via their low back versus their pelvis. They're not engaging their hips like they should at the bottom. So being weak at end range is something, whether you're in the gym, you can talk to your coach about it, how to help you, but that's like a common fault. You're weak at the bottom. You don't know if you're in a neutral position. You don't know if your back is actually neutral. And when you initiate via your low back. And oftentimes, if you've already had a low back injury from lifting or from picking something up, you're more likely to do it again, that same pattern, if you haven't corrected it. So ask any like smart clinician, they'll say, yeah, if you've never actually rehabilitated a movement after injury, most likely your body's going to fall back into that same pattern. It's like you read, a guy that I like to follow is Stuart McGill, right? It's like the hammer effect. You hit the hammer on your thumb once, ouch, hurts. You hit it again, hurts, it's annoying. But eventually over time, as the hammer approaches, your thumb just starts to throb. Because if you've done it so many times, it becomes way more sensitive. So it's just like your low back. After lifting so many times just with your back and not using your hips, or having a bad end range position, means now you've got this hammer hitting the thumb, and over time, anytime you approach the bar, your back is like, F you, this is gonna hurt. And it becomes a lot more sensitive and a lot quicker to be injured or feel injured and have pain. So that's number one. Two is executing via the low back or the pelvis. So I kind of covered that at the end range positions. You want to execute a movement with your pelvis and not your low back. So again, I'm going to reiterate this. When you're at the top, so let's say I'm initiating an RDL. So I'm extending via my pelvis, not my low back, okay? No, yes, and then I'm shoving my hips back. I'm initiating with my hips, right? And not my low back. So you see a lot of this, sexy back, as people go down. And while that may look sexy, it's not so healthy for this area of our body. Versus what you want to see is hips shoot back, back